Okay, we'll get started. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications and GeoCollaborate. I'm the co-chair of the ESIP Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. Maggie Glasgow is also the co-chair. There she is. Hi, Maggie. Maggie, tell everybody where you are right now.
I am in Tucson, Arizona, where it's slightly cold, but not as cold as everybody else, I'm sure.
Oh, that's great, Maggie. It's good to see you. And I'd also like to introduce everybody to our ESIP fellow, Jael O. Hey, Jael. Jael's with the University of Texas. And what's your temperature there, Jael? Do you know?
I think we're currently 34, so it's not bad at all.
34. Oh, that's shorts weather. That's great. Well, welcome, Jael, and also I think Maggie, we're going to be asking a series. We're going to also going to have you can scan them in a QR code, but if you want to put a link in the chat for asking answering the poll questions, that would be great. So we're going to have basically a session here where we would like you to think of questions, and we're going to open your mics later so we can have a conversation. Because if you remember, those of you that attended the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster session in Asheville in July, we talked about how do states use, produce, share, and access trusted data to inform decision makers and even the public. And so, just 2 months later, we had one of the largest disasters in U.S. history, pretty much, with the Hurricane Helene making landfall in the Big Bend of Florida and moving on up the coast. Helene was the strongest hurricane on record to strike the Big Bend region of Florida, and the deadliest Atlantic hurricane since Maria in 2017, and the deadliest to strike the mainland U.S. since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And so there's a whole lot of work being done. People are still recovering. I'm not going to dive into any details about the event because I know that there might be some folks that are connected right now that are still going through that tragedy, and it's very impactful. There was a session at AMS in New Orleans last week where it was a two-part session on the impacts of Hurricane Helene, and it was really a touching session. Lots of people got up and talked about how they are still trying to deal with it and will be for years and probably decades. So what we're going to do here in this session is we're going to talk about Helene and the data that was accessed and used by the state of North Carolina. Gary Thompson was our guest last summer. And we really appreciate you rejoining us again, Gary, to talk about how the Feynman system was used, what lessons you've learned, and what adjustments you might be making or enhancements to that system throughout this session. First thing I'd like to do is just go over a couple of standard items when we're having these hybrid and virtual meetings. Please mute yourself if you're not talking. When you ask a question and you're ready to ask a question at the end of the session, please raise your hand and also turn your camera on so we can all see you. Add your location, whatever you'd like, name your organization, all that stuff. And then please ask questions via the chat and feel free to engage in conversation. So if you put questions in the chat and we're going through a series of questions, I'll just recognize you by looking at the chat and say, okay. And if you really want to ask a question, just raise your hand if you have something to contribute with that particular topic that has come up. There is this the QR code that you see. This is our youngest participant in the session today. He's all ready. to join on his laptop, but you can scan that code and it'll take you to the Google Docs. So please go to the Google Doc and sign in. That way we know who was here, we can follow up with you, we can answer any questions that maybe weren't answered, and we know what's everybody that was participating in the session today, which is great. I just wanted to kick off this. I grabbed this satellite image from GeoCollaborate here just a few minutes ago, just to show you the historic snowstorm that started in southeast Texas, went through Houston. Everything is still shut down in Houston. The roads are too icy. All the way over to Cameron Parish, where yesterday, extreme southern Louisiana, right on the Gulf Coast, that was devastated by Hurricane Laura and other hurricanes over the last several years, had a blizzard warning, the first blizzard warning ever issued in southern Louisiana there, and snow continued to fall. As a matter of fact, Denise Hills yesterday, when she was coming to us, lives in New Orleans and sent me a picture of 11 inches in her backyard from her ruler, which is just incredible. You can see extended across Mississippi, Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, shut down right now. I-10 basically in the west portion of Florida, shut down through Mississippi and or Alabama and Mississippi and into Louisiana. It's just too dangerous. Nobody has plows down there. They had to borrow them from other states. And then that rain snow line going up, just touching south of Atlanta, southern Atlanta suburbs into South Carolina, North Carolina, and then southeast Virginia got a little bit of snow out of this. This snow up to the north was from a previous snowstorm, not from this one that we actually got about a week or so ago. But the storm is still it's pulling out of the Outer Banks of North Carolina right now. So we have some crazy weather that's been going on, and it seems like that streak is continuing over the last couple of years with extreme events in areas where people don't expect it. So here's a link to the Slido poll, which is also in the chat window. There it is right there. And we'll go through these as we finish the questions, and then we look at the poll results as well. So what we're going to do today is we'll just have a little introduction about the disaster lifecycle cluster, what we're working on, what we're talking about, who's here, why we're here. Our guest speaker, Gary Thompson from the North Carolina Division of Emergency Management. He's the Deputy Director of Hazard Mitigation and the Director of the North Carolina Geodetic Survey. We're going to talk about trusted data and lessons learned, and we'll tell you a little bit about our monthly meetings, but really do want to have this as an open conversation. There's the link to the Slido poll. So the first thing I'd like to do is to ask who is here. That's the first, is that the first question? Maggie, you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to encourage folks who may have any follow-up questions or thoughts or comments to add those to the session notes that were just linked, so that we can address those if we don't have time during the session.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Thank you, Maggie. I'm also going to, I'm going to minimize, whoops. I want to minimize this, but put this into slideshow mode. I want to, oh, I guess I can't. Maggie, I'm not going to be able to show the poll results because I guess my slideshow is going full screen with how I'm sharing it.
I would just take it out of full screen and then you can go between tabs, but up to you.
Oh, okay, okay. So, so what do you see now in my share?
Right now we see the Google Slides. So if you
Okay,
click, I think on the Slido tab up there in your browser.
yeah. Can you see
There you
that
go.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. All right, so this is what we'll do then. I'll just get out of the presentation mode as we show this. So welcome, and who's here? Heavy on the researcher side. That's awesome. Developers, others. No one in communications yet. And it looks like we have 11 responders. We have more than that in the participant list here. So we'll just give it another minute so you can continue to answer. Okay, we'll stop it here in about 5 seconds. I think I must have, I guess I skipped over the first one. That's my bad. Let's go ahead to the second question. And let's see here, I'm going to slideshow this. So why are we here? The Disaster Lifecycle Cluster is working to really understand trusted data, how it's produced, how it's made available, and how it can be made available to communities, because communities do need trusted data. There's too much misinformation and disinformation flowing around that people don't know what to believe. And if we can introduce them to more geospatial data and trusted information, they can then better become aware of their surroundings and situational awareness so they can make better decisions. Agencies in federal and state, they collect, quality control, archive, and share data. Private organizations are also collecting data for their own apps. Working with data is limited pretty much to data scientists, technology experts, and tech-savvy users. I mean, very few people go to trusted sources to access what's going on, and they don't know what's going on sometimes when certain things happen. Where can they find that information? So we've talked with a lot of agencies. They have goals. They have, in some cases, executive orders that are telling them to make data available to the public, but progress is slow. Some agencies are putting data out there, and you have to be a data scientist to access it. And that does the public no good because they don't want to click more than 2 or 3 times to find out what's going on, sometimes no more than once. So while extreme events increase in frequency and magnitude, it makes it very difficult for data to be identified and used. And so that data is made available. When it is made available, it's not always the easiest to understand. Interfaces are tough. Many of them are developed by scientists for scientists, and it's very tough to understand what's going on there. So our Trusted Data Now initiative, which we talked a little bit about last summer in Asheville, we want to identify trusted and authoritative sources, data layers that can easily be accessed, that are timely, interoperable, particularly web services, we're finding are working very well, easily understood by the community and people who access the data. That's a challenge because data is often put up there, again, by a scientist, not really understandable by the layperson. And so we want it also to be easily communicated. How can we put that together in ways to communicate to the public what it means so they can appreciate that data, so they can understand when data collection activities either get broadcast on the news or they hear about it in their chat groups, that they support it and they understand why these data collection activities are needed. And certainly it has to be trusted. This is our vision, that data is so easy a child could do it. So one of the other questions that we'd like to ask everybody that's here is, what disaster types do you typically support for response, decision-making, and/or situational awareness? If you're doing research, what kind of disasters or what kind of activities are you researching that might contribute to some sort of disaster response. And there's the Slido link. I'll go up and put this up in the, there it is. You can scan that in the upper left-hand corner as well. So I see flood forecasting. We'll give this a few minutes so you can get some time to scan this in and answer your question. Weather-related events, harmful algal blooms, drought and wildfires, floods. These are all really relevant and important pieces of input. Researching drought signals, floods, wildfires, and earthquakes. Forest mortality. Wildfire catastrophes, also watching weather and thinking about seismic events, volcanism, tsunamis. How about a CME? Yep, that's one of the things we're going to have to watch as we've had that experience over the last year or so. Boy, that May 10th and 11th one was just spectacularly concerning. Okay, that sounds great. We'll move on to the next poll. We appreciate that. Slideshow up again, and we'll go to the next one. So today's speaker, Mr. Gary Thompson, is joining us from the North Carolina Geodetic Survey. He's been the chief there. He's also been continually modernizing the agency. Gary and I were speaking a little bit yesterday about the LIDAR data gathering projects that have been going on within the state of North Carolina. And he also serves as the Deputy Risk Management Chief for North Carolina Emergency Management. Gary joined us last year, as I mentioned before, or last summer in the summer meeting, and talked about a couple of systems that they've put together. One of them called the Feynman system. And that system, I just have here just 2 slides, is a really fairly intuitive interface to take a look at the flood situation, river gauges and things like that within the state. And we accessed that system and used it in our video briefings. Some of our video briefings last, when Helene was impacting the state. We provide briefings to the All Hazards Consortium, their sensitive information sharing environment, where we share information to private sector liaisons within state emergency operations centers, and also private sector organizations from the food, fuel, transportation, communications, medical supply, logistics, and energy sectors, so we can talk about impacts. So I was just made co-chair of or actually the chair in the All Hazards Consortium of the Weather Impacts Working Group, where we're going to be talking with all these sectors to identify what pieces of information are critical for them to keep the economy moving. And floods and flood inundation is a serious concern as people need to move across the country and deliver goods and services. So this is just a screen grab. We have a crawl going off in the top that's deals with state declarations and waivers. And what's going on there, and down the bottom, this scroll is just it's a general overview of what threats are coming. And this in the middle here is the Feynman system that we used to talk about flood inundation during Helene and those tragic floods, and even identifying building footprints. So Gary, I really appreciate you joining us today, and I'd love for you to take over the screen share. I'm going to stop sharing. You can take it over, and please, the floor is yours. Take it over, and we'll have a great conversation after you're finished.
All right, thanks, Dave. And can you see my screen okay?
Yep, we can see it just fine.
Okay. So as Dave talked about Feynman, and back in the July meeting, I gave an overview, but I wanted to go through and give you a quick history of the development of Feynman here in North Carolina. And you can see by this kind of flow chart here, we actually started the system wasn't called FIMA, but around 2003. This was just after Floyd and Fran here in North Carolina. And it's also at the same time that North Carolina partnered with FEMA to become a cooperative technical state, which means we assume responsibility of the development of flood maps. And later on, I'll show you our website's called FRIS, Flood Risk Information System. So we started our floodplain mapping program, and then we started our flood warning program. And you can see we've gone through different iterations of FIMA. And the one that Dave just showed you is the recent version, which is FIMA 3.0. And each time we made new updates, we worked with our partners, the private sector, to tell us what new features we needed to add. We've also partnered with our Department of Transportation. They're a key partner in FIMA in both developing the application, but also for gauge maintenance and gauge installation, and their funding support for us. So it's a great partnership. And as you'll see as I pull up different screenshots of FIMA, we also partner with federal agencies, USGS, NOAA, to include their gauge data. And also the private sector and some nonprofits and local governments also. So we're seeing a lot of local governments installing gauges, and we incorporate that gauge data into FIMA. We also have a policy here at Emergency Management that we'll assume maintenance of those gauges. We'll partner with the local governments once they install the gauges, and we will then take over maintenance for them. And it varies as far as the levels of maintenance, as far as the funding, as far as replacing equipment. But we work with those local partners to ensure that we keep those gauges operational, especially during events, so that can help inform the public, help inform emergency managers where there's potential for impact. Too far. So as Dave showed you, this is the latest version of FIMA, and the goal when we went to this 3.0 was to make it very visual, so that as soon as you went to the opening page, it gave you a quick impression of where there's problems. If it's all green, then we know we don't have any problems. And you can see kind of on the left, the menu that shows you the different levels of flooding. I was going to include, we captured some screenshots during events, and I forgot to include one during this event to show you the extent of flooding. When we see purple, that means we have some major flooding occurring. But some of the changes we made, we enhanced our ability for alerts, so that individuals could kind of customize their alerts. So if they live near a gauge, or if it's in a local government and they want to get information about the gauges in their community, they can set up those alerts and customize those to determine when they should be informed. We also use, so FIMA is our kind of customized application we build in-house. We use a commercial package called Contrail to collect all the gauge data and archive it. So there's a lot of researchers on the call. We provide access to Contrail, so you can get all that history of a gauge. So if you're doing a research project, you want to do studies, you can just contact me and we'll provide you access to our database of gauge data. So we have gauge data. If a gauge has been operational for 20, 30 years, we should have all that history of that gauge data in our database. And that's available to anyone that would like to have access to it. We also put in some new search parameters so that instead of you having to zoom down, you can search by, go immediately to a county. You can go by river basin, or you can go by DOT division. So just some little features that helps you quickly get to gauges that you're after. We also have put in some search where you can show gauges that are out of service. And that helps us because with our field staff that helps maintain these gauges, they can go in daily and look at this and see if there's a gauge in their area that needs service. We also, as you can see there, we've added a weather feature, so you can turn on the weather to see if what the radar is for the area. So a lot of new features we've added. So I'll show you some screenshots. These are actually some screenshots during the event. This is over in Marshall, North Carolina, and you can see the extent of flooding there, and the impact of buildings there. One of the things that we learned from this is some of our way we visualize this information. We call them our libraries. Our professional engineers develop libraries or extent of flooding for every half foot of elevation. And what we learned at some of our gauge sites is the flooding exceeded the libraries that we had developed. So we've identified which gauges that we need to expand those libraries so that we can always visualize what the level and extent is. This is in Asheville there. I think this is the same screenshot Dave had. This is scenario mode. You can see the level. This flooding was low over 24, almost 25 feet. And again, you can see all the major flooding in the buildings by purple. That's over 5 foot of water in those buildings. Each gauge, there's a hydrograph, and we did presentations about our coastal hurricanes. In those cases, the hydrograph will show a rise in water, and it takes time for that water to recede. In some cases, if we get rain here in Raleigh, North Carolina, it can take up to 4 days for that flooding to occur at our coastal areas of our county. But you can see here, one of the things that caused a lot of damage, and for this storm, was the rapid rise of water, and then it went down. So that's one of the things that did a lot of damage here in Western North Carolina, that rapid rise of water. And you can see this site is a forecast site, and the dashed lines are indication of the forecast water elevation. Not all of our gauge sites are forecast sites, but where they are, we provide that forecast information for viewing. So one of the new things we've added into FIMA is the history. So if a gauge has been through other storms, we'll have that documented, and you can go into that gauge and you can see this gauge there in Asheville. We have the history of 5 storms there. The storm of record there was the 1916 flood of 23.1 feet. And this event exceeded that. But you'll be able to visualize what occurred, what was flooded during each one of those events using the history tab. And as in our previous version of FIMA, we have building impact information. One of the things that we're in the process of doing is updating that data layer of building footprints so that we can keep that data layer up to date. And so that helps us provide this information as accurate as possible with the amount of buildings that we have. And you can see just at this gauge here, the extent of the library of this gauge. There's almost $49 million worth of damage to buildings there at that French Broad River Asheville gauge. I showed you this. This is one of the tools that is widely used, the scenario mode, used by local emergency management, local officials, so that they can visualize if there's an indication of how high a river or stream is going to rise. They can go in with the scenario mode and actually visualize what's going to be impacted, which roads are going to be impacted, which buildings. That helps them determine where they need to evacuate, where they can stage resources to make sure it's safe. And just simple. And so as I change, you'll notice as I raise the water level elevation, you'll see the amount of extent of flooding change. And we can only do this at gauges that we have these libraries, these pre-engineered libraries. And currently, there's about 290 gauges we do not have libraries, but we received funding from our General Assembly last year, and we have contractors now working on developing those libraries. So by the end of this year, almost all of the gauges in FIMA will have these libraries, and we'll have the ability to visualize the extent of flooding. And as you notice, as I raise the water level elevation, you'll start seeing, you can see the legend there on the bottom left. Yellow means there's water surrounding the building, and then you get to red and purple, that means there's water in the building. So you can see, so this is a great tool that can be used for planning purposes, and also for the public to decide, do they need to evacuate, which roads can they use as the water level rises. So a new layer, as I said earlier, we partnered with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And NCDOT, when we built FEMA, was more focused on building impacts and infrastructure impacts. So NCDOT developed FEMA-T, which was focusing on transportation. And so working together with NCDOT, we have now combined both FEMA and FEMA-T into FEMA 3.0. And so now you'll be able to not only see building impacts, but also transportation impacts. And you can see here on the screenshot, it shows which roads have water on them, and the depth of the water, and also at each bridge. You can click on those bridges and it will tell you the amount of freeboard or if the water has actually gone over the bridge. So have that information. We also share, all our gauge data is shared with NCDOT, who uses an application called Bridge Watch. And that they use that to help determine impacts to bridges. So our gauge data is not only being used in FEMA, but it also is being used by North Carolina Department of Transportation in FEMA-T. In Bridge Watch. So our gauges were critical component during the event. During press conferences, it was announced for the public to look at FEMA if they were in an area that was being impacted. Our PIO, all our public releases had information about FEMA. So we encouraged the use of FEMA. We also, our field staff was where we had a gauge that went offline. It was safe to get to that gauge to determine if we could get it back online. We did. We did lose some gauges during the event, and there's some lessons learned during that event. One is that we have a couple gauges that we've lost more than once due to the velocity of the water and the restrictions for where we can put the gauge equipment. And so we're looking to possibly use, so the idea would be to get gauge equipment away from the water body. Most of our gauges are radar gauges where we can actually get the equipment looking down the water, but if the bridge gets washed away, then we lose the gauge. So there's a technology called GNSS reflectometry, basically using the GPS and other navigation satellites radio signals that bounce off the water and then to the antenna to measure the level of water. It's being used to also measure snow depth. So we're looking at these gauges that we've repeatedly lost to see if we can use that technology. That would allow us to get the equipment completely away from danger, even in the highest flood event, but still be able to measure the water level and provide that information through FEMA. So we're currently looking at some sites that we could test this technology, see if that's something that there are some limitations on where you can use it at. But we're looking at that technology to help us in those areas that where we are continuously losing gauges because of the terrain, the velocity of the water in those areas. So one of the key things that was needed during the event was aerial imagery. We have a daily call during the event. We had a daily call with FEMA, the Remote Sensing Division, which also included representatives from NASA and NOAA to see what resources were available to collect aerial imagery. It was needed for search and rescue. It was needed to start doing determination of damages. So there was and landslides to try to map landslides, to map and see where potential new landslides could be occurring. So that was a daily call. We would then coordinate with all our different partners to get requests of where imagery was flown. And so I'm just showing you one of the, so we had aerial imagery collected by NOAA, by the National Geodetic Survey. The Civil Air Patrol collected imagery. We also had some commercial private sector imagery that we utilized. We also worked very closely with NASA to obtain satellite imagery and other remote sensing resources like SAR data. We also had was able to utilize some commercial SAR data to help us analyze the extent of flooding. So we had a variety of imagery acquisitions. Our North Carolina Department of Transportation had numerous UAV missions where they were collecting aerial imagery, in some cases a LiDAR, mainly along the road corridors where they had where they lost bridges or the road had been washed out. So we had a variety of imagery that was collected, and we worked to share that with the local, anybody that requested the information. We worked to make that data as easily available as possible. So this screenshot here just shows you where the NOAA National Geodetic Survey's emergency imagery was collected. This imagery is very useful in that they collect it. Once they collect it, usually it's posted and available to the public that night in a format where you don't need any tools to view it. It's very helpful to get this information out to the public so that if somebody's interested in their property or if access to the property, they can go in this imagery and take a look at it. So we would have the daily calls and we'd work with our partners to do resource requests of where we want imagery flown. And you can see in the highlighted areas where imagery was collected by the National Geodetic Survey. There was also other areas that Civil Air Patrol collected imagery also. And these are just some examples of the aerial imagery. And these were very helpful for the local communities. This is Marshall, North Carolina, a little island there in the town. You can see there's well, that's a water treatment plant or there's some type of infrastructure there. You can see it was completely flooded. Here's just some other areas. You can see the amount of damage and devastation that was done. Where you currently, and as I said earlier, we have our floodplain mapping program here. And so one of the things we're doing now is where we have imagery, we're analyzing that imagery to determine where the channels have changed. And that's very important because where we see channel change, that can help us focus on where we need to update our flood studies and where bridges are washed out. So we're currently going through all the aerial imagery that was collected right after the event to analyze the impacted areas and what impact it has on our regulatory flood studies. And again, you can just see the amount of damage here in the area. This is a tool developed by ESRI, and it's very useful. It, when you can see the link down at the bottom, it allows you to do the slider bar and see before and after imagery. And this is really helpful for determining damages, also for debris, where debris is at to help map debris, and also help figure out how to remove the debris, the best access areas to get to the debris. So this is a great tool that was provided by ESRI. So those are the kind of the FIMA things that happened during the event. And we're currently now working to restore any gauges that we lost. And we're working in partnership with NCDOT because a lot of those gauges were on bridges that were either damaged or maybe completely washed away. So we're coordinate with them as the bridges are replaced to put gauges back in. In some cases, there may be a temporary bridge installed, and in those cases, we may put a temporary gauge in so that we can, if there's rain events, while that new bridge is being installed, we can still provide information to the public about if I flooded in those areas. So this is our what's called FRIS, Flood Risk Information System web application. So we are a cooperating technical state. And so we develop and produce our flood maps in partnership with FEMA, and then provide those maps to their specifications to FEMA. But we've built our own application here that we can display the flood maps. And this is also a new version of Frizz. We just rolled this out with some enhancements. Works basically the same as the previous version, but with some enhancements. So you can see here is an area there on Riverside Drive in Asheville, North Carolina. And it shows one of the things that's very useful for professional engineers, professional surveyors here in North Carolina, was where you can actually go to an area within the special flood hazard area and click on it, and it will provide you the base flood elevation. So this is a very useful tool for surveyors and engineers that can use when they're working for a client in that area. And so we're now looking again where things have changed and where we need to do new studies to update the regulatory floodplain in those areas. What you're seeing here is the blue area is the special 100-year special flood hazard area. The yellow area is the 500-year, and kind of the hatched area is the floodway. And you can see on the left, I clicked on a point inside the special flood hazard area, and you can see the information about that at that location, including base flood elevation. Frizz is statewide. We have completely, when we started the program, our goal was to remap the whole state. We have completed that. And now we're back in our maintenance phase where we're coming back through a second time and doing maintenance on our flood maps. So a new tool that we had started before this event, but data was only available in Eastern North Carolina, was our flood advisory viewer. So Frizz shows all the regulatory flood areas. The flood advisory viewer, we use 2D rain on grid studies to be able to show where flooding will occur on almost all streams, even the non-regulatory ones. What you see on the flood data viewer is not regulatory, but it can be used by local communities to help determine where permitted and where impacts will be, because it will show flooding in even the smallest streams. And so you can see in Eastern North Carolina, we had done a lot of work in that area, had done the 2D rain on grid studies. But we also just recently completed that in Western North Carolina. You see the kind of the pink area around the Asheville area. And so we recently added that area to the flood advisory viewer. And this is just a screenshot that shows you where you can zoom into an area, even on a small stream that we haven't studied, and it will show you the extent of flooding in that area. So this is a very useful tool now for recovery, to help rebuild, and it also can provide some information about proof of where flooding occurred in those areas. So as you can see here, that's where we've completed the 2D rain on grid studies, but this is where we're currently working on new 2D rain on grid studies. So you can see we have a combination of state and federal funding that we're working on this. And so the goal is to have this 2D rain on grid statewide that can be used by local officials. And then at some point, the local officials, we can then work with FEMA, request funding from FEMA to then upgrade those to regulatory if the local communities request that. So the other key thing that we're now doing post-event is collecting high water marks. Very critical information for a variety of reasons. This is just a screenshot showing you an example. This was a previous event, but one of the things we use the high water marks for is to quality control our FEMA libraries. We're showing that to visualize the flooding and also to calibrate our models for our flood studies. So this example, this was in Eastern North Carolina. You can see we surveyed the high water mark, obtained coordinates and elevation, and then we compare that to on the right is our modeled area at that moment in time. And as you can see, where we surveyed the high water mark and the model matched. And so that's the goal of collecting high water marks is to ensure that what we provide in FIMA there's quality control to it and it's accurate and up to date. So just some reasons, the benefits of high water marks. It's the best way to document the extent of flooding. It will be used as we're doing here mitigation actions. Those high water marks can be used for that. Our engineers will use that to calibrate the models. And as I said, we use it to quality control libraries in FIMA. And we get a lot of requests for high water marks for research projects in the area and also for public safety to keep the public informed of where the extent of flooding has been in previous storms. So collection, it's a partnership. We work with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, USGS, the Army Corps of Engineers. We also have a public-private partnership with the North Carolina Society of Surveyors. They have volunteers that go out and mark high water marks for us and also survey high water marks. And then a lot of local governments assist us. We realized we started a big effort to collect high water marks probably in Matthews when we started collecting the most, Hurricane Matthew in North Carolina. And we realized that the evidence goes away very quickly. And so we developed, you see on the bottom left, we developed a high water mark phone application that the public can use or any of our partners can use. They don't have the resources to survey the high water marks. They can simply mark it for us. And then we will send a survey crew out to collect survey information on that. So that's been used a lot by local governments and the public to submit high water marks for us. And these are just some examples here recently. You can see the debris line there in the fence. The picture on the right don't show it very well, but you can see kind of stain marks in the concrete of the extent of water. This one clearly you can see the debris line of where the extent of flooding was. And then again, more debris line. So we're going to probably collect the most high water marks for this event than we've ever collected. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is collecting a huge amount of high water marks, and we will probably end up with in excess of 2,000 high water marks for this event to document and to assist with research, and also again to calibrate our models and do quality control. And all the high water mark data is available to the public. We share that. We will also share it with USGS to put in their, they have a viewer that has high water marks and other information that is easily accessible. So I mentioned those imagery was very, very useful during the event. Remote sensing data. NASA and USGS partnered to provide data to help the North Carolina Geological Survey to help map and identify landslide and possible landslides. So imagery and remote sensing data is a key data set that we need. But what we need now after the event is new LiDAR data. We had collected, here in North Carolina, our agency had collected, we had 2 previous statewide iterations of LiDAR data, and we just started in Eastern North Carolina collecting on a 3rd iteration. And we've used a variety of sensors. This just shows you the 2 different types. The one on the left is kind of the linear sensor. In 2016-17, we used a Geiger mode sensor, which uses uses a circular rotation, can fly much higher. So we've used different types of technology. This was our phases of data collection, and you can see the kind of green area, which is central part of the state. We had just completed, we collected new LiDAR data in that entire area in early 2024 and in the final phase. And the plan was to go to phase 4, which is the purple area in 2025, but due to the storm and the damage, and we have now changed that, and we're currently collecting new LiDAR data in all Western North Carolina counties in partnership with the UNC Collaboratory. So the pink areas are the areas that UNC Collaboratory is collecting LiDAR data with their contractor, and then gray area and the green areas is our contractor, where we are coordinating the data acquisition to seamlessly merge those data sets together. Data collection should be completed. Hopefully, have no more snow in the mountains, so we can collect by the end of February. And then typically it takes about a year to do the quality control processing to get it available. We're going to try to speed that up a little bit just because of the need of the LiDAR data for all the rebuilds, for our Department of Transportation, just a variety of uses of the LiDAR data that we're collecting. So what supports all this is our continuously operating reference station, which is our network of GNSS receivers statewide. As you can see, we had statewide coverage. This provides real-time corrections for users for any of the mapping needs during the event, after the event, for our LiDAR data collection for high water marks. So you can see we have a statewide network, and we also share data with Tennessee and South Carolina so that we don't have any drop in coverage area along our state boundaries. And this is just one of our cores. This is kind of the newer generation continuously operating reference station that's solar powered, and so it gives us the flexibility to install these in areas that has good view of the sky. This is a great location, except we found out in this field, people like to go out in the field and drive their trucks around, and right after we install this, some of the equipment got hit. So we've had to put some kind of barriers around it to protect it from damage. And so one of the last things that's occurring is there was a lot of channel change from all the velocity, and which impacts ownership property. So we've been working with the professional land surveyors here in North Carolina, and they'll be using the imagery, they'll be using the LiDAR data, they'll be using the high water marks to determine if someone's property calls for a stream or river, has that stream or river changed? And how did it change? Was it change because of illusion, rapid change? And so they'll have to take all that in determination to determine where property boundaries are. There'll be a lot of loss of the physical property boundaries, the monuments. And so we've been working with the private land surveyors in those areas to provide them support data to help them do their job, to do before and after data collection, help them identify where those rivers or streams, the channels may have changed during the event. And that's kind of a background of what's going on. And so, Dave, I'll turn it over to you for any questions.
Well, thanks very much, Gary. This is really terrific. I have a number of questions that I wrote down, particularly that last one that you just talked about, that last point about land changing because of the flooding. I'll get back to that in just a moment, but we do have some questions in the chat. The first one was from Rama. He basically said that it wasn't clear how the library is defined in your context when you talked about libraries. Is it a historic record of the readings from a given gauge, or is it something else?
So it is something else. So what our professional engineers do is they take our LiDAR data at the gauge location to give them the terrain. And then also if there's any field surveys done to determine the depth of the channel parameters. And then they use an H&H model to determine, to determine the extent of flooding for every half foot of elevation. So it's basically a model that shows the extent of flooding. And so when the gauge says the water level is 100 feet, FIMA goes in and finds that model, which shows the extent of flooding at 100 feet, and then visualizes it. So it's an engineered hydraulic and H&H model that's specifically designed for each gauge location.
That's great. Rama, did I capture that okay? Do you have any other follow-up to that question?
No, that gives me the answer. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. The next question Sean Huang says that another question came in and shifted it up here. She said that these tools are fantastic. How do you disseminate those tools to the community?
So the FIMA and Frizz are both open web, they're web applications. So anybody, there's no restrictions on those. Our LiDAR data, we have a tool called Spatial Data Download. And again, it's a web application too that's available to the public, which is currently, we're doing some upgrade on that. But what Spatial Data Download will allow anybody that wants access to the LiDAR data, you can go in, draw a polygon around your area, and it will email you the LiDAR data. Either you have the choice of bare earth or all return data. All the LiDAR data we collected is all the points are classified. So you wanted to just want bare earth, obviously you can, which is what we use for flow mapping. But if you wanted vegetation, buildings, you can sort that out. So Feynman, Frizz, and Spatial Data Download are all public-facing web applications. Our high watermarks, we are working on. We currently just provide that on request, but it's open to the public. But once we provide it to the United States Geological Survey, to their web application, that will be available on demand from that web application. You won't have to request information. Our flood data is in Contrail, and we just need a simple request to get access to it. And we'll provide, that's open to anyone to provide access to it. The only thing we asked, and when we provide you access, a lot of times researchers want to get 20 years worth of data. And so we have to work with them not to put a restraint on our system, pulling that large amount of data down. And we'll work with the researcher to get that data to them efficiently. So everything that we collect is open, just different ways of providing it to the public.
That's great. Sean, do you have any other follow-up to that answer? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do. Hi,
Hi.
it was a great presentation. I love everything. A couple of questions. So I understand people can have access to those tools if they know it, but
Right.
how do they know it? Is there a platform that have everything in one place and have like some provide some directions for the community to know this and use this? Because some of the tool is very useful, like am I in the flooding zone? Because I know I'm in Johnson City, Tennessee, so which is very close by to Asheville.
Right.
And I know a lot of people didn't buy flooding insurance during Hurricane Helene time, before Hurricane Helene time, and that caused serious damage of their finance and everything. So how do you promote this to the community and tell them, hey, you're living in the flooding area and you need to buy flooding insurance?
Okay. So a variety of ways. During events like this, Governor Cooper who's our former governor, would always announce during the press conferences to the public, go to FIMA, and you live near a flooded area. And so, and then our public information officer, they would promote the use of FIMA and our local TV stations. A lot of times the local TV stations would show views of FIMA like Dave did. We do training. We provide training to local governments. And one of the things I was talking with Dave yesterday is one of the things we should look at expanding that is providing that training more, and not just the local officials, maybe to the public too, to give them more insight of how to use that. We're also looking to develop some like YouTubes to walk you through all the different features of FIMA. So currently it's through press releases, our PIO, our webpage, and during interviews during the event. As far as the insurance, we do have a feature on Frizz for that, but FEMA is also just rolled out a tool that helps people determine the cost of insurance. So we work, as I said, we're a partner with FEMA on that, and we work very closely to encourage people to buy flood insurance. We also promote local communities to take part in the program. It's called a community rating system, where communities can get points for doing mitigation efforts to be part of the National Flood Insurance Program. And by the more points they get, it helps local citizens reduce their flood insurance rates. So those are the areas that we are working to promote tools we have, and we do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of workshops to share this information and provide guidance on how to use it.
That's very helpful. And I do have a couple of questions, but I don't want to dominate this one. So I will email you, and probably because I'm working on a flooding dashboard in Central Appalachia, trying to collect all information like related to flooding information, socioeconomic status information, because you also need to know, okay, this county is very rural and has limited access to those help. So I'm working on that. I do want to discuss this more with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, just send me an email and we can set up a call.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
That's great. I was going to suggest, Sean, that you and Gary need to tag up, because this is great. Sean won one of the ESIP competitions for a little bit of funding to produce this flood dashboard for Appalachia. So this is great. I'm so glad that you were able to connect here. And Sean, don't go away, because if we have some more time, you can come back and ask a couple more questions if you want.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So Gary, one of the other questions here, and it looks like this one might be answered, is from Rama as well. It says, do you have mobile apps to help users see current flood risk and near future projections for their locations?
So that's one of the things I missed when we started. So FIMA 2.0 was not mobile friendly. And so one of the goals for FIMA 3.0 was to make it mobile friendly. So it's very viewable now on a mobile platform, because we realized during the event we have first responders out there, the public, everybody's going to be looking on their phone, not going to be at a computer. So it's very mobile friendly now for viewing of the information that you can see on your computer. And then you saw the high water mark application that we have developed.
Rama?
Yeah, I just was thinking of it because I've been using a mobile app, Watch Duty, to watch where the fires are. I live in California, and I found that quite handy. It shows where the fires are, what the containment status is, and also the wind direction, so we can figure out if your home is going to get affected. So something like that is quite handy.
It is, and we had a meeting yesterday, so we're looking at we've got impact or input from our local officials about FIMA 3.0, and so we're looking at some new features to add that we've got comments from saying, can you do this? Can you do that? One of the things that we're looking to do is we have alerts now that for water level elevation. But one of the things we're looking to do is put alerts. So if a local emergency manager has 10 gauges in their community, we want to set it up so that if one of those gauges goes out of service, they don't have to go look. They can set it up to get an alert. So it would tell them that, yes, this gauge now is offline. Instead of us having to call them, they call us. So that's one of the new features that we're looking to add. Because if the gauge goes offline, then we've lost our view then of what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Gary, another question from Bob Bunge says, how did the event affect your website? Were there any impacts that affected responders or people looking to access the site?
No, and that was one of the things we learned from Matthew and Florence. We had huge amount of traffic during Florence and Matthew, and we had to do a lot of work to keep it operational. And so we've done a lot of upgrade since then, and this was the first test of FIMA 3.0 during an event, and we didn't have any IT issues. So that was a big success for us to make those improvements so that, you know, it does no good if you go out and publicize it and then it's not available. So that was one of our goals. But no IT issues during the event.
Is Feynman running in the cloud, or is it running locally within somewhere within North Carolina?
3.0 is in the cloud. So that was one of the changes we made.
Oh, that's great. And one other thing that hit my mind, were people, because I know that power and cell was knocked out in Western North Carolina. Did you implement any Starlink capabilities during the disaster?
Starlink capabilities were, but not for our Feynman gauges. A lot of our gauges, and so we use 3 different ways of transmitting the gauge data to our system. We use GOES mainly in the coast for some of our gauges. In the mountains, we have a VHF radio network, and then we use cell modems. So we did lose cell coverage, we would lose that gauge data. But like I said, a large number of our gauges in Western North Carolina were on our VHF radio network, and we had one tower where our repeater was. We got low on fuel for the generator, but the first responders were able to get fuel up to the mountaintop and kept it operational. So that's one of the things that we're looking for future events is more GOES maybe, or maybe more commercial satellite communications like Starlink.
Yeah, it really seems like just listening to your awesome presentation, thinking about community connections, and have you learned anything or looking to implement anything in the future where you have more people going out to inform communities well ahead of an event, right? But well before the next event comes, to get them up to speed with what you offer and the capabilities that are there, so they can have that link to trusted information from the state.
Yeah, we do a very good effort with our local communities, but there's area there where I think we could do more to the public to help them inform these tools. We know that the local officials inform the public, but as part of our floodplain mapping program and our flood warning program, we do have public meetings. And so we're already talking about providing more information about what tools are available and how the public can use those.
Oh, that sounds great. Let me get back to the questions here. Has there been, this one's from Tim Bailey, has there been discussion or consideration about alignment between Feynman and FRIS and the USGS 3D HP program?
Yeah, so we work very closely with USGS with our LiDAR data collection that then they will use to for their 3DH program. And so we do partner with not only USGS, we work very closely with USGS on sharing data. So I guess the answer is yes. We share all the data we have to help them update their programs, their information for their programs.
Okay, that's great. I think that's it. If anybody else has any other questions, I have a number of them that I'd like to go through, but if there's anyone else that's participating here who has a question, you can either raise your hand or type it into the chat. We'll keep an eye out here. Oh, I see there's a comment about, given our experience in Western North Carolina, it seems it is more important to get this information out before an event and to make people take warning seriously. Yeah.
Yes. And there was also a newspaper article about the use of Feynman by DOT about how it helped them shut down a road before it flooded and help keep people from driving down a flooded road. So it was in, I think, New Observer a couple weeks back. There was an article about that.
Yeah, that's great. Here's a question that just popped in from Ryan Berkheimer. I wonder if edge computing tools could support the need, smart or predictive loading of models to the edge in app storage, so users could at least understand the last high-res predictions and response options. The tool would need to understand likelihoods of comms loss so that response tools can leave non-connected users with at least some cached info on hand.
Yeah, it sounds like a great research project. So we currently work with North Carolina A&T GMX program. We have 3 research projects with them, and so it sounds like a potential research project to work on.
Yeah, and Gary, I'd also like to, just throw into your hat that if you are looking to engage any others with either ideas or potential research support, that you think about ESIP. Within the disaster lifecycle cluster and within ESIP in general, there's, I think, more than 160 or 70 organizations that are members of ESIP. That is kind of like a great reach into university research and, federal lab research and private sector and nonprofit research that might be something of value that could help and support North Carolina. I mean, particularly we've been to Asheville a couple of times with our meetings, and so we have a strong connection to the North Carolina community. Douglas, I see you have your hand raised.
Right. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Gary. I joined your presentation midway, and I'm wondering, in the tools that you have, do you have any information about those critical infrastructures in the state that may be at risk of the flood, and as a way for people to prepare or like respond to those? Because one thing we see is infrastructure failures, like the road and bridges, and then also the communication, like fibers and channels and all that. And so any information that can highlighting the risk for those critical infrastructures for people to prepare in advance.
Yeah, so with adding the transportation layer, that includes roads, bridges, and also the NCDOT's critical infrastructures. And we also look at water treatment plants and sewage treatment plants in there. So those are the ones we currently critical infrastructures. We have in our data layer, we have the information about hospitals. We get during an event, we get a lot of requests to help, medical facilities, though they need to be evacuated. And so we use a combination of FRIZ and FIMA. First, we'll go to FRIZ to see if that infrastructure is in a special flood hazard area. And if it's not, then we'll look to see if we have a library that will cover that area. And then now with our flood advisory viewer, if we don't have a gauge nearby and it's not in a regulatory flood area, that flood advisory viewer can be used by local officials or the owners to give determination if that area is going to flood or not, and if they need to evacuate.
Thanks.
Oh, that's great, Gary. I mean, listening to this, it makes me think, this seems like almost Herculean effort to get out and partner with these communities and inform them and educate them and put the word out. What is your staff or team of partners look like? Is it, you have 10 people, you have 100 people? Do you have, what does that look like?
So our FIMA team, we have a FIMA manager, and then we have 4 field staff that maintains the gauges. And then our partner, DOT, so they help us a lot. For example, if we need to remove a gauge on a highly trafficked bridge, they'll bring out the equipment we need to lift it, do lane closures. But our day-to-day staff is those 4 field crew that do the maintenance on it. We also have an adopt a gauge program, and we work with local governments and nonprofits to adopt a gauge for us. And basically, what we're not asking them to do any work on the gauge. We're asking them to keep an eye on the gauges for us. We have a lot of vandalism. Mainly still in the solar panels, but here recently we've had entire gauges stolen. And so the Adopt a Gauge program is designed just to help somebody local can help us keep an eye on it. Or if the gauge goes down, we'll ask them to go out and take a look at the gauge and see if there's something missing that's been damaged. So that's the effort we kind of include our partners in to help us keep the network going.
Have you had anybody steal a gauge that actually has a GPS connected to it, and you can just go right to their house and get it?
We had one, but it lost power before we could track it. So
Yeah, gotcha.
lesson learned. We're looking at different ways of doing it. They basically took a saw and cut the pipe and just took everything.
Wow. Yeah, I'll tell you, that is amazing. I want to go through two other ones here, and then I have a couple. Ryan came back and said digital twin federations are exploring some of this capability. It could be a potential area to coordinate with multi-res between fed, state, and local organizations.
Yes, I formerly served on NOAA's Hydrographic Service Review Panel, and digital twins. There's a lot of discussion of that, and I think I think there's potential there for partnership and working together.
That's great. Steve Young says, Gary, do you have any real-time access to rain gauges so that you can see where flooding is likely to occur based on actual precipitation at a granular level? For example, slow-moving cells or downbursts, things like that.
Yes, we do. Not all of our gauges have weather sensors, rain gauges, but a large number in Western North Carolina do. And we even have some sites that are strictly rain gauges. So all that data is also brought into to FIMA or into Contrail, and we share that data with the National Weather Service. So the other thing I failed to mention is all our gauge data we push to the National Weather Service and NOAA for their determination and forecasting.
Oh, that's great to know. Okay, that leads to my first question, which is, it seems like you've made so much progress with FIMA and the inundation visualizations. Are you working at all with the Weather Service's National Water Center and their flood inundation maps? Any of their model output from the National Flood Model?
We are, and can't remember, but that's one of the things. I don't know if we've turned it on yet or not, but one of the things that we're going to add to FIMA is you'll be able to see that information. So yes, we are working with them.
Yeah, because they are setting up web services for accessing that data, so it should make it easier to pull in. Okay, that sounds great. So one of my questions, Gary, is about ocean observing systems. So, in North Carolina, you have a very popular and extensive ocean front. What kind of flooding can you determine when you talk about ocean and inundation flood modeling from storms out to sea? Because I know Route 12 gets cut off a lot, gets covered with sand. And then on into Pamlico Sound and everything. Are you working with like the IUS community at all to put in more ocean observing capability?
Yeah, we're working with Socorro to install gauges along the coast. We also just recently, in the last 3 years, we partner with NOAA, their co-ops program, and they've incorporated 6 of our gauges into their co-ops program for tidal determination. We work with our DOT because NC12, obviously, they work to keep that open. So we work with DOT to determine where best to install those gauges.
Mm-hmm.
We also work with the National Park Service. They're doing some of the GNSS rectometry there along our coast. So we have a variety of partners, National Park Service, that we're working with to install gauges that are strategically located and that we can provide data for researchers for modeling. There's also a center here in North Carolina at the UNC called the Renzi Center. We've been working with them for years, and they do a lot of the modeling with that, coastal modeling that we provide data to them and support information to them.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I know you talked a little bit about alerting and the FIMA, the last 2 AN is alerting network. How does the alerting portion show up is that like a proactive texting, or is it visual showing up on the map itself when current sensors are in flood stage?
So it's individually. So if you go in, you can set up like Dave wanted to set up one for the gauge at Duck. You go into that gauge and then you customize it. Do you want to be informed when it's minor, what level of flooding is, and then you'll get a text email let you know what that the gauge has hit that level. So it's
Gotcha.
individually customized. And then on FIMA, when you go to the viewer, the legend will change. So if a site is a forecast site and it's forecast to have what will hit flooding level, major flooding level, you'll get a indicator on FIMA of that, a visual indicator that site has forecast to have major flooding. So those are kind of two separate, but there is some visualization on FIMA if those are forecast sites.
Yeah, I did notice before when I went in that you can actually you can go in and create an account and log in. So I guess that allows you to do more customization once you've created that account.
It is, and that's one of the things we updated from 2 to 3.0 was during an event, individuals would go in and maybe set up a lot of alerts, but then after the event's over, they don't want to get those alerts. So it was a little more difficult to turn those off with the previous version. We've made it much more simpler now to turn off an alert if you no longer want to see that alert or receive that alert.
Gotcha. I guess one of my last two questions here is, what are you, just generally, I mean, what are you seeing across the state of North Carolina over the years? Are you seeing an increase in the amount of floods? Are you seeing an increase in the number of floods in areas that usually didn't flood? What kind of benchmarks are you seeing with regard to more intense rainfall?
Yeah, I don't have more intense rainfall, but we're seeing, historically, a lot of our storms were coastal. Hugo was one years ago that came up through central North Carolina. Western North Carolina, we got hit by Hurricane Fred and then Helene. So Western North Carolina has seen their extent of damage in there. So I wouldn't say, I just say where we've had flooding, now that we have gauges, we have more, I guess, eyes on, can collect more data where that flooding has occurred. But as you can see on the slide, the one here in Helena, some of the areas, the storm of record was 1916. There in Asheville and Chimney Rock.
Yeah, probably weren't too many gauges around there.
No.
Yeah, no, that's right. My last one is you just touched on it, or not just, but before in your presentation, when you have such a historic flood like Helene coming through, and of course you were having floods a couple days before Helene came through, and then Helene came through and just doubled and quadrupled that flooding level. But how do people who had half their land washed away, how do they know that they're not getting land taken away from them, or they're maintaining the land that says they own on a plat?
Yeah, I think they just need to work with a professional land surveyor to come out and remonument where their property boundaries are. And then the surveyor, you can see that last slide where our license board has provided information on. So the surveyor has to collect the information to determine, was it alluvial, was it a quick rapid one, and use that evidence to help determine where the property boundaries remain. Using both the imagery that we've collected, which we had imagery, we have imagery here in North Carolina. Our wireless 911 board funds aerial imagery on a quarter of the state every year. So our imagery is no more than 4 years old. So we'll have in that area pre-storm and post-storm imagery that the professional land surveyors can help determine what has changed and where the property boundaries are.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a challenge that's going to be. I can just imagine somebody saying, yeah, we're supposed to have a river on our property, and it just moved about 100 feet over there, and it's not on our property anymore. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. Looks like we're coming up on time here. We have a couple more minutes. I just want to share my screen once again. Gary, if you could stop sharing, and I'll put up. I want to capture a couple of things from our conversation here, and hopefully we won't go over. But I really appreciate your taking time, Gary, and you can stick with us for a few more minutes. I don't, going through Helene and all this activity and PTC 8 just several weeks before that in Wilmington, dropping 20 inches of rain there. You guys have really been taking it on the chin. Let me share my screen and ask you all that are connected, and thank you for remaining connected here. I want to ask you to scan this and answer a couple of questions here. What challenges did you face in accessing or using data to support situational awareness during Hurricane Helene or other disasters? We certainly extend our deepest sympathies to all those affected by the devastating floods caused by Helene. I mean, in Western North Carolina houses NCEI, of course, the nation's largest archive for climate data. And our hearts go out to your families and communities. Let's just see real quick if I can change my, there we go. Real-time data access was a challenge. Where to get the most trustworthy information? Yeah, that's something that is always in question. And that's where I really think a lot of the work ahead of time before these disasters happen really goes to building up trust. Okay, there's still some folks typing in an answer here. I want to go to the next one in just a second. Absence of infrastructure. Electricity and Wi-Fi, yeah. Total comms blackout, no cell service before even the biggest rains hit Friday morning. These are all serious infrastructure questions and concerns to make sure that information continues to flow during these disasters. That's when people need it the most, that's for sure. Okay, let me go over to the next question. If you could change, let's see, one thing about the way disaster-related data is prepared or shared, what would it be? If you could change one thing. There it is here on the poll. If there's one thing you could change about the way disaster-related data is prepared or shared, what would that be? This input will also help us steer the disaster lifecycle cluster in directions where you're providing the input, and you can give us some information, much more personalized. Yeah, I got to tell you, when I used to do the weather in Washington, D.C., people would always ask after each forecast, when is it going to hit my house? When is that storm? When is the hurricane going to hit my house? When you're talking about a 800-mile wide storm. High resolution, more opportunities for reliable on-the-ground observers to contribute real-time information. Yeah, that's good. And I have noticed too, I think in the latest iOS updates that you can actually use your phone and connect to satellite connection. I don't know what kind of capabilities that gives you, but in an emergency, I think that's starting to come online. Maybe we'll see more of that. Created standards for data collection, create dashboards which can be integrated within clinical electronic health record systems and public health systems. Oh, there's a challenge right there. Huh. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. You can keep answering and typing into that. The next one that I want to go to here is what emerging technologies or methods are you excited about for improving disaster response and recovery? What emerging technologies or methods are you excited about for improving disaster response and recovery? And it can be anything, anything that just hits your mind. What technologies or methods are you excited about? AI, yeah, that's a that's a good one. A lot of digital twins, yeah. Space-based communications like Starlink. There we go. This is good. Drought signal, diurnal, cool. Yeah. Researching drought signals. Okay, yeah, this is great. Keep typing. I'll just give this a couple minutes. Okay, maybe we might go 3 minutes over. Apologize for that, but these sessions are so important and we have such great discussions here. Okay, keep typing. We're going to go to the next one in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go to the next question. That will be, how do you imagine participating with the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster? So just throw that out. Attending our monthly meetings. We do meet every month via Zoom, and that is the first Thursday. Maggie, correct me, I'm going off the top of my head. First Thursday of every month at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.
That is correct.
Okay, great, thanks. First Thursday. And we don't send out that link, Zoom link, directly in emails to prevent Zoom bombing, but you just come into the ESIP community calendar and you can connect through there. And we have sometimes invited speakers, or we just sit and chat about what's going on and things like that. So number 1, rolling up my sleeves. 5, that's great. We appreciate that. And please send us or Maggie, myself or Maggie or Jael an email and let us know, because we would love to have you more actively engaged, staying informed, and just kind of listening and taking it in on the edges. That's great. This is all wonderful input. Let's go to the next one, the next question. And we have 2 participants that are still typing in here. This is great. Let's see. The last question here, I believe it's the last question. What is something unique that the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster could address in support of providing access to tools, products, and trusted data over the next 1 to 3 years? What's something unique that the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster could address in support of improving access to tools, products, and trusted data? This helps us get, instead of remaining general with disasters and trusted data, we would like to dive a little bit more deeper into specifics. Okay, Jael, do you have that next question that come up? Question 8. I don't know if that's something that we have in there.
That's gonna be in our session note.
That's going to be a next session?
In our session. No, in our session note in Google Docs.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
as a
Awesome.
closing mark. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds terrific. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody participating in this. Gary, thank you for your time and expertise. I'm really super impressed with Feynman and all the activities that you have going on there in North Carolina. And we would like to help any way we can to bring it more to the public, training through, broadcast Mets in the media or other places. So let's keep this going. And Patty, thanks for popping in. You can stop the recording. Really appreciate everybody's time.